Let's talk about the possibility of enacting the Billy Graham rule today on the Christian Principles Podcast.
This episode of the Christian Principles Podcast is brought to you by the Herzog Foundation. And as always, the thoughts and opinions expressed within this episode are those of your hosts and not necessarily the Herzog Foundation. Welcome to the Christian Principles Podcast. I'm Matt George.
And I'm Mark Zonkel. Today, we're talking about the Billy Graham rule, but we're continuing the series we've started on avoiding scandal. Some of the other avoiding scandal episodes have been broad. Today, we're going to go very specific. And we've discovered, established, it's a precedent of our work to this point, that even though we go specific, there's still so much to talk about. So we're going to talk about so much, even though we're going to be talking about so little. You know, it's like the further you go in your life in education, the more you know about almost nothing. Truly. It's a wonderful irony. Well, this is a good time for us to stop before we keep going and let you know that we are 6 episodes away. I believe it's 6. Just going to double check that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 episodes away from our 231st episode, which will be our State of the Pod number 7, which will be the first episode of our 3rd season. That's incredible.
Wow.
And again, 230 episodes will mark the first 2 seasons, which for us, that's 2 years. This has been full go for 2 years now, and we have some exciting things to share with you. We have some people to shout out, some emails to read, some social media comments to laugh at, hopefully not cry over. We're going to have a good time. I hope. I'll have a good time. I imagine you will too. But between now and then, let's go ahead and hear from the Herzog Foundation, our longtime partner, as well as GradeLink Student Information Systems.
This episode is brought to you by our partners at the Herzog Foundation, whose mission aligns beautifully with ours to advance and support Christ-centered education. The Herzog Foundation exists to catalyze excellence in Christian schools, helping more children experience academic rigor, biblical truth, and strong moral character, all in a safe and nurturing environment. Whether through teacher training, principal development, or strategic media efforts, the Herzog Foundation is committed to helping you, the Christian school leader, fulfill your calling with excellence. Their vision is bold but clear, a national renaissance in Christian education that impacts culture for generations. At the Christian Principles Podcast, we're proud to stand with the Herzog Foundation in that mission. Learn more at herzogfoundation.com. Together, we're building schools and futures on the rock of Christ. And as always, tell them that the fellas here at the Christian Principles Podcast sent you their way. You know, as a host, I actually use GradeLink myself, and I can't recommend it enough. It's been a huge help in keeping things organized and making sure our school's administration runs smoothly. So, if you're part of a school that needs a reliable system, head over to cpp.gradelink.com and see what they can do for you. All right. Well, we've been talking about avoiding scandal quite a bit, and as we said at the beginning, we're going to try to keep this one straight and to the point. So, we're talking about the Billy Graham rule today. Good old Billy Graham, pulling them out.
I tell you, I had not prior known the background of the Billy Graham rule, but I could tell you the Billy Graham rule, which was, in my estimation, you're never alone with somebody, and you're never in a car or a room, behind closed doors with somebody. And I often, sadly, and I'll say this sadly, heard the Billy Graham rule referred to sarcastically, and even in a putting down of the rule. Like, this is stupid. These Christians can't handle themselves. How misogynistic is it? How male centric is your viewpoint that you have to cost me time as a professional because you have to sit with? It's usually castigated, and I had not prior thought or looked up where it came from. So I did that. Man. Did a little bit of research, which
You looked it up.
It's hard to call it research. You can't even call it research because it's just typing something into a chat bar. That's all it is. But Billy Graham
Yeah.
Evangelistic Association put out this in July 23rd, 2019, as you see on the screen. The first Billy Graham rule was actually the second of 4 rules. Didn't know that. I won't read all of this, but basically in Modesto, California, Billy Graham and his team, which would be Cliff Barrows, George Beverly, Bev Shea, we usually were just Bev Shea, and Grady Wilson came together and they thought, okay, what are we going to do to make sure our ministry is above board? Because there's so many evangelists like us who get in trouble for different things. So there are 4 rules they came up with. The first one, the first point in the combined list was money, meaning the finances were the first thing that all 4 of them thought of, and that evangelists were known for being, even Mark Twain talks about the evangelist at the camp meeting being nothing but a pickpocket and a
Hmm.
charlatan kind of thing. The second rule was about the
Hmm.
dangers of sexual immorality. The third rule was about how evangelists carry on their work apart from the local church. And I didn't know this, that he didn't want that to be a part of his ministry, that he cared about the local church as what was created in the gospel, what was created in the word as priority. And fourth, final issue was publicity. The way they're going to publicize themselves is going to be honest all the time. So first of all, 4 rules, not just one, when we talk about Billy Graham rule.
Hmm.
Secondly, though, I'm going to read this paragraph. It says the second item on the list was the danger of sexual immorality, which that's it is where we were going. Sexual immorality, I suppose, would be the overarching scandal that we're talking about
Hmm.
today. But specifically, I thought that Billy Graham rule was I knew it was about sexual immorality, but I guess I thought of it more just for good. I don't know. It obviously is about sexual morality, but to hear these other 4 rules in place, and the other
Yeah.
ones being so meaningful as well, there's just so much more context here than ever was offered to me prior thinking through this.
Yeah, it's definitely the above reproach. And a wise rule is that we're not going to just say, "Hey, let's not have affairs with other people. let's be faithful to our own wives." It's let's make sure that number 1, there's nothing that's going to come in the way of our ministry and hindering us. And what can hinder us, and that's where I think the list easily comes from. What can hinder us? Being careless with money, being, caring about money too much, having, some kind of accusation when it comes to immorality. I mean, what's going to take down a preacher faster than that? And then, yeah, the way that typical relationships of evangelists with local churches and in the media is going to be of high concern, because you want to make sure that when you go in to minister, the people are open and they're not distracted and they're not putting you down because they have these other things in mind to tear you down with. Now, with this second rule, the idea of we don't want the reputation, but you can continue on and say, well, by following this rule, it's going to be difficult to actually give in and actually commit an act of sexual immorality. So it's very much a good guard, as much as it is like, oh, we really struggle. And if I'm alone in a room with a girl, like, it's going to happen. Like, it's terrible. Like, it's not as much that as it is, let's just make sure there's no way possible anybody could think, or it's not giving itself even the possibility of happening.
I hear you, and so much of this does come back to that avoidance, and he says the same thing. We'll read this in a second, but before I go to the second item, which we think of as the Billy Graham rule, even though apparently there's 4 rules that the Billy Graham Association made, I would point out that these 4 rules would be great for us to go over, and Matt, they'd be great for us to make a workshop about, and I think we need to present these in what they actually are versus what they've
Mhm.
been noted to be by popular media and those anti-Christians out there. So I think there'd be a lot of
Mhm.
value in our administrative brothers and sisters reading through these rules and say, okay, on these first four, not that they couldn't do this with the Bible or something else, but the history of their own ministry, perhaps, or history of ministries around them. But they could read through these four and saying, do we make sure that we are not casting down the local pastors and churches around us? Especially in a
Mhm.
ministry that has multiple churches represented, right? Where are we publicity? Are we actually making claims that are accurate, or are our claims unsubstantiated? Oh my goodness, how many of our Christian school leaders just say, "Yeah, well, we're better than the private school down the street because we have Jesus"? Well, are you? Show it to me. Make the claim and back it up with the actual truth of whatever you have to back it up with. But okay, so all that being said, we still have not focused solely on the second item, which we need to. So I'm going to read this to us, and we'll let hopefully get down to that that space. Hopefully get down to this more narrowed discussion. The second item on the list was the danger of sexual immorality. We all knew of evangelists who had fallen into immorality while separated from their families by travel. So again, big deal here, travel, which we are planted, so that's going to be one of the differences for us. But we pledged among ourselves to avoid any situation that would even have the appearance of compromise or suspicion. From that day on, I did not travel, meet, or eat alone with a woman other than my wife. We determined that the apostles' Paul mandate to the young pastor Timothy would be ours as well. Flee youthful lust, 2 Timothy 2:22 KJV. I do find this interesting. The context is demanded when Mamdani speaks and he takes shots at whoever. He cries for, but hear what I'm saying on the whole and back and use my entire life. But when people again throw rocks at the Billy Graham rule, are they thinking about how much he was traveling? Are they thinking about how often he was away and without cell phones and without I don't want to say the accountability of the cell phone, because the cell phone itself can be one of the most, a portal into the evil. That the but with as much time away as he had, with as many new faces as he was seeing, as his though he was a huge name, his relative, his ability to get lost somewhere, like all that being said, this was a big deal for him, and we're not in the same boat necessarily. Maybe we are
Yeah.
traveling more than others are in our building, but we're not traveling like he was. So even then, I think the context of what he was saying this in also deserves some measure of review.
Yeah. I mean, not only that, but his level of, I know he would claim it, but his level of celebrity, it's that how much of that was pursuit. I mean, when I look back at video footage of his meetings in these stadiums that are just filled, which there's a big part of me that's like, who is that today? Who's going to go and preach at an arena or a stadium and it's just going to fill up, and it's good preaching. It's not just, who is that today? But because of that too, because of his popularity, like there's going to be interactions that I'm sure he was like, this is not a comfortable situation. Get me out of here.
When that celebrity exists, there are the famous prisoners who wound up with girlfriends through through their letters, right? These women became
Mhm.
enamored with this story of this
Mhm.
inmate, and they wound up, having these relationships. So the fallen nature of people around us would lead to even those men and women in places of leadership in the church or in gospel ministry probably having fans or people, attracted to them in such a way that, again, I don't think we're dealing with quite the same thing necessarily. Though, of course, our ministries have all organizations have levels of care they need to take in order to stave off sexual immorality. Not saying that we shouldn't because we're not celebrities. But again, the
Yeah.
context offered. Thank
But
you for
it's
that
even
thought.
it's yeah, and his point is the appearance. It's not even the idea of we just want to avoid sexual immorality. It's even the appearance of it. And in same ways, our ministries are shut down even if people are just sniffing. I don't trust that guy. I mean, he is shady and he's doing things that we have a lot of questions, and you're gonna lose a lot of trust and respect if you're not being careful. And even if you have not committed anything, just the appearance can go a long way.
Let's take this bit by bit. Is it possible for the Christian school administrator, Christian school principal, to never be alone in a car with a member of the opposite sex? Would you say for you that is absolutely possible?
Absolutely possible. Yeah.
I don't know of how many
Next.
times and I say possible as in, yes, we know it's logically and rationally possible, but how often in your ministry would you be I mean, you have female principals under you, so your direct
Hmm.
reports are female. In fact, all of your direct reports are female, and the ones you go to and are on the administrative team or the office team, they're all female. So, if
Hmm.
even for you, is it relatively possible for you to get through your year without having to be in a situation where you are in a car alone with a woman?
Yeah. Number one, I guess we are not as much travelers. We are stationary, but it is, I guess the beautiful thing for me with having multiplicity is anytime it is like, hey, let's go over here, it's going to be a group more so than in one.
I can think of one situation in which I was in a vehicle with a woman in my roles, and that was I mean, and not to say that there was an excuse for it or needed to be an excuse for it, but what I'm trying to point out here is in my however many years it wound up being a leader, a building leader of a school, it happened one time. And so it wasn't even something that there was necessarily a rule about. And that one time
Yeah.
was, it actually wound up being the time they were throwing me a surprise party and they had to be guaranteed that I was out of the building doing something. So the person who was part of the planning committee took me out on a very special mission, whatever it was. But anyway, there was a big surprise party waiting for me at the end of it. So I would agree. This part seems relatively easy. Never in the car alone. And even if that meant the school had to pay for the gas of two vehicles to get somewhere that was far away, where otherwise we'd only take one, like a administrator's retreat or a professional development, well, too bad then. We're taking two cars kind of thing.
Hmm.
So I think that part relatively easy. And if we could have done it with basically being the only men in a situation of so many women, it would stand to reason that that's possible for others as well. So let's go to a different one. Let's say the off campus eating a meal with a woman alone.
I just, I just think about the wrath I would get when I got home if that was the case. Not in an untrusting, how dare you, but like, why wasn't I there eating too? Like, like, that's, I can't even think of a situation. I'm like, I guess maybe in a situation where maybe you're interviewing somebody
Yes, that's what I was
and
thinking.
you're going to meet somewhere as opposed to, them coming all the way but still like I would, I guess just the way my brain even works before I even get to a let's follow the Billy Graham rule is if it is a female, then I'm definitely bringing my wife along. If not, I'm going to be bringing along my administrative team as well because they're going to have just as much of an interest in that interview as me. So there's 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 safety in numbers, and I just don't even I wouldn't even feel comfortable in that kind of a situation being out. Like, I don't like going out to eat as it is, so I guess that's why this is a little bit easier for me maybe than it is for other people, but yeah, I doesn't need to happen.
I was thinking of a role I have currently where I would go and recruit. So, would there be a situation where I
Mhm.
was recruiting with an administrator of a school? I would say I could see that happening. I could definitely see, which means I'd see the
Yeah.
reverse happening that a recruiter wanted to meet with me and take me out for lunch somewhere. Okay, well, I can see that happening. And this is where I would say, well, I I don't consider that private though. That's a public place,
You're
a
in a public
restaurant.
place.
Yeah, a
Yeah.
restaurant. I'm not going to drive there with them. I'm not going to, go into some. speakeasy, saloonish. It's not going to be a high end restaurant. We know that. So it's going to be out there. If it's like Panera or something like that, but for people to see, I would be
Yeah.
expecting to see people that I knew. So on this
Yeah.
part, I would say the whole eat alone with a woman. And again, got to remember context here. This is also a
Yeah.
time when fewer people were doing. Panera didn't exist. The fast food joints were
Yeah,
not quite what they
I was gonna
were.
bring that
Like
up too. Is that time restaurants? I mean, you definitely went there to go with your spouse. The culture at the time had not gotten to the place where you have business meetings out at a restaurant. Like you don't you didn't do that. You met in the office or whatever else. Whereas you we have Starbucks, we have Panera that are almost offices in and of themselves,
exactly,
in the public
exactly.
sector,
Yeah,
that people are doing this. And it does it remove the appearance? Oh, I saw Dr. Zockel walking into Panera with some strange woman. Ooh, we talked about this when we were talking about the teacher with the students, walking into the bowling alley. Kind of a similar thing in that, like, okay, context is everything. You're walking in broad daylight during lunchtime, and clearly you're even in like some kind of business attire, or this is not just a casual let's go get to know each other really well. Like there's a lot of context clues in our current culture that just were not present when Billy Graham, who is traveling hundreds of thousands of miles away from his wife and is gone for a long time, and going out to eat was a lot more of a private matter than it is today.
I grant that. I think the traveling alone, we've talked about how we basically don't need to do that. So we can follow the rule and it's not even realizing that it's a rule, but maybe having it written down means something. The eating alone, if we're talking about eating out somewhere, I could definitely see a place where I would maybe be meeting with someone, a meeting with a lady to eat with her in a recruitment setting, you know, they're taking me out for an
Hmm.
appreciation setting. Board member, there we go. Board member would want to take me out somewhere and or want to meet with me somewhere for I could see that happening. I do think it's a contextually different though. I do think that we do have a bit of a difference here. And if that truly meant I was breaking the Billy Graham rule, I would be fine with breaking it at Panera or at the Starbucks, like you said. That in fact, I've heard leaders of the church say go and meet at those places so that you do have the the eyes of the world on you.
Accountability.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. There's accountability in that. So
Yeah.
I give some pushback there, but I also completely understand the rule. I get it. Okay, great. And by the way, let's not just skip over the fact that perhaps there is a spouse that this could be a stumbling block for the spouse of the administrator. And so that spouse says, no, I don't want you to do that. And you say, well, then I won't do it. And that way
Yeah.
you are building up the brother or the sister by you are not demanding of them or allowing for them. And you know what? That recruiter, if they want you, if they want your business, they're going to meet with you with another person. They're going to take the both of you out to lunch, or they're going to come and meet in your
Hmm.
office. Which I think this is where the Billy Graham rule gets. If travel is easy and meeting alone to eat is kind of easy because it's different. So the first one's a sure. The second one's like a no, I don't agree with that. The meeting alone, I think this is the part where I really got to get nuanced. This is the part where you want to be the most careful on both ends. And I want to hear the cries
Yeah.
of those around me saying, listen, treat women with equality and don't, especially professional setting, let them be that you shouldn't have to they shouldn't have to think that you're thinking horrible things about them or sexual things about them as they walk in your room. Like, okay, I want to hear that. I want to hear this. I want to. So when he says, I did not travel, meet, or eat alone with a woman other than my wife, I look at that meet part. I say, okay, so now I'm the head of a faculty and staff. Perhaps you're also HR. You're right. Perhaps or even just when you're doing your reviews of your classroom walkthroughs, they've filled out their review of how they thought the day went. You fill out your review, and you're meeting with them one on one. If you're the principal or you're the administrator of the school, so it's a smaller setting and it's just you, and it's a professional setting, and they don't want somebody else in the room with them. I got a second grade female teacher. She doesn't want somebody else in the room with them, hearing what it is that we're going over. I'm gonna say a few good things and a bad thing about what it is they are, something to grow on with what they said. Is that a situation where I can't meet alone with them? Give me your thoughts on that.
I think it is a good practice if it at all can be avoided. So again, going back to my situation where I have an elementary principal, if I'm going to be meeting with a second grade teacher, it makes a lot of sense for me and the elementary principal to be meeting together. But there might be times where they want to meet me alone. The other, I guess, safeguard is if I am meeting with them in my office, door closed, because maybe there is something that they want to bring up and they don't, it's sensitive. So I go back to my counseling days where you might, as a counselor, or even a pastor, you are going to have to counsel ladies. And I know churches for a long time said, well, ladies are going to counsel ladies, guys are going to counsel guys. That may or may not be possible. But if ever I'm in a situation where a lady is going to be sharing information with me to receive counsel, one of the very quick things that I want to make sure I do and I accomplish is, okay, I I'm going to keep everything confidential as is necessary, but I'm going to ask you two things. One, that I have somebody outside the office that will check in randomly just to make sure, there's, kind of holding accountability. Just there's somebody, then that would be, my secretary can just pop her head in. Hey, everything okay? Do you need anything? Nope. Okay, wonderful. There's the accountability side of it. But then also, like, if you're sharing something with me that like I can't share with my wife, like I don't like sharing things with my wife, but again, that is who I, number one, am most held accountable to. But if it's something that even I have to keep from my wife, it's like, don't share this. Then I'm going to ask that we come up with some other way of communicating this, because that's a safeguard for both of us. I can't promise something that I can't keep. I can't promise confidentiality if I know it's like, hey, I need I need somebody else to know that I know this, because that's going to affect the way I'm working, affect the way we're working together, whatever it may be. The levels of it, again, I just think in numbers are safety. That does not mean that if any female staff member comes and says, "Can I have a meeting with you?" Sure, but either I got to have a third person in here or that door's got to stay open. That's not practical. It's not.
I'm glad you got practical. I'm glad you got to the practical.
I want to
That's a big
make
deal.
sure that I am it's not practical. You got to be able to have those conversations, but have still, and this is the wisdom of the Billy Graham rule, is have systems in place for that accountability. Uh, to make sure that you're not opening yourself up. I can't help. I've known too many pastors and even school administrators that have given in, that have fallen to closed doors and doing things behind closed doors nobody would suspect. So you want to make sure you do have a very forthcoming, upright, like, I'm going to make sure that I'm protecting not just me and my ministry, but also the person I'm meeting with. I want to protect them as well. So make sure you have those safeguards in place.
I think if we're actually honest about 100% of our meetings, we start with all of them in view in your year. What percentage of those meetings could be held with the door wide open? Well, in all reality,
Yeah.
well over half of them could be, let's just be nice and say
Yeah.
50%, but I actually probably think it's closer to 75%. So I think most of the meetings we occur in our offices can be open door meetings. So then we say, okay, what are some other, how about during school hours? Which of the meetings do we hold that could be open door and during school hours? I'm not going to meet with you before somebody else is in the building. I'm not going to meet with you when everybody else is gone. Just, is that really that hard of a rule to make for us? How about, I mean, the third party actually is probably and not because of sexual immorality, but I think of because of legislation. I feel like the third party is such a big deal now. Anything with HR, anything with parents, if at all
Mm.
possible, if there could be a third party in that, man, that's so we're really narrowing down that 100% of meetings down to whatever percentage it would be that we can't have open door um, during school hours and with a third party. We are quite literally talking about something that is probably less than 10% of the meetings that we have, and probably even closer to 5%. And at that point, yeah, I need to have vetted an administrator that can have 5% of their meetings in a closed door opposite sex, having still the safeguards of this is going to be a 15-minute meeting and someone will knock on the door at 15 minutes and they're going to knock on the door at or like you said, they're going to have the opportunity to knock on the door at 7.5 or whenever they went between, but they are going to open the door at
Hmm.
15. We know that regardless. So maybe that's what the statement is. Perhaps it's a different way of safeguarding ourselves by letting the entire staff, faculty and staff know beforehand, if you do want to meet with me one-on-one, no problem. There's going to be a very small window of meetings that I will handle one-on-one, and those meetings that I'll handle one-on-one will be handled in this manner. So there's also the thought that if I detail out for my faculty, my staff, my parents, and the students as well, if I detail out to them, this is how meetings with any faculty or staff member will go. I actually think it's the teachers who will by volume have way more opportunities to be one-on-one with students and with parents than administrators will, which is interesting to think about because then you've just multiplied the amount of issues you have, and you would again
Hmm.
want to make sure you've built in, the glass door. Even a glass door in your office. Does your office door have a window on it? Is something like just like we would in a classroom, is that possible for you? So there's a lot of different barriers that we can put in place, obstacles to our own flesh that we could put in place in a positive way, safeguards that for those, I I really think I'm just gonna say 5%. You tell us, am I wrong? Is it more than 5% for you? Can you honestly say it's more than 5% for you, our listening audience? Because I would say it's 5% for me, and it would come down to the administrator, excuse me, to the person who is in crisis, but, when they come in and they've gotta talk to me right away, there's a crisis point, and I do have to those meetings, there's going to be built-in safeguards in those meetings, even if I have nothing written down, that would have to do with the way I need to respond quickly. So I'm probably having to make phone calls. I'm probably having to bring other people into knowledge of the meeting and what's going on very quickly, being it the pastor, be it an office person next to me to go pull kids or go make a phone call out here. There's probably going to be some shifting going around quickly out of the normal part of the day in those I say crisis, but high emotion meetings. And for the ones that are a professional meeting that's not a crisis and the person deserves to be heard one-on-one by me, and I don't want to begrudge them that professionally. Okay, well, again, for those meetings, if I've communicated that this is going to be reduced to this amount of time, if I communicated that we're going to keep that door open as much as possible, or that I'm not going to cover the blind on my door for whatever reason, if there are ways to provide details to those who are involved in these meetings so that they know what they're coming into beforehand, and even you could say contractually, they don't have an issue with it because they were told well in advance what these meetings are going to look like.
Yeah, and let's also not forget there is a beauty of saying, "Hey, can I just record this meeting so we can look back on it later?" Not maybe not video recorded, but
Huge,
audio, at least
huge
audio
deal.
record like that. That also is another big thing, especially when you mention the crisis, because it's in those moments where whether it's a heated parent or just somebody that's totally broken, they may not necessarily remember everything that they said. And so, recording it is helpful too, for many reasons. But yeah, that's another
All right,
possibility.
Matt, is there anything else you want to comment on this Billy Graham rule, specifically the second of the four rules concerning sexual immorality and being an administrator avoiding scandal?
We've mentioned that it's not quite fair to just toss rocks at this rule and say stupid, dumb rule. There is wisdom in making sure that you're avoiding even the appearance of relationships that could be questioned. It's good to keep in mind the safeguards, the accountability, just to again make sure that you are keeping the your own reputation, but the reputation of your ministries. This is far too important just to be casual about this. I think there are practical applications that today are different in our context than it is when Billy Graham's ministry was going on. But it doesn't mean we are careless and we just neglect that. So look for ways to just make sure that you and your ministry is safe, held accountable, and we are doing exactly what we're trying to discuss here, avoiding scandal.
Yeah, if you don't have anything written down, go write it down. Another theme from this podcast, go and write it down. And if you don't have rules in place yet, maybe you just start with these four. And if you have to winnow them down to what works, do so honestly. Don't do so without
Yep.
serious regard for what we've been just talked about. How many of your meetings actually have to be one on one, possibly opposite sex? So we should keep going here. We're going to recognize today a Mr. Andrew Fry. Mr. Andrew Fry from Colonial Christian School. He is the administrator of Colonial Christian School out in Indianapolis. And we're out of time, so Matt's just going to pray for you right away, Andrew.
Father, thank you so much for Andrew and the work that he does at Colonial. And we're thankful for that ministry. I know even just history that I've had with it. And I pray, Lord, that you would just strengthen them and be with Andrew and allow him to develop the programs that need to be developed. And if they're adding faculty, staff, students, whatever it may be throughout the summer, I pray that you would just guide and protect and allow him to grow in his relationship with you and with his family and his church family. We pray, Lord, that you would just continue to use that ministry in a way that is honoring to you. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. All right, folks. Thanks for growing with us today.